Mr. Trump, as you ponder China trade war, count the $33 billion Chinese tourists spent in America. As the administration of Donald Trump ponders how best to launch its trade war with China, maximizing impact on China and minimizing cost to politically important voters at home, it could do worse than pause to think about tourism. And as he and his henchmen like Robert Lighthizer fulminate about merchandise trade deficits, he may do well to remember that set against those visible trade deficits, the U.S. is the world's largest exporter of services, with surpluses almost anywhere you look. And 40% of those services exports are tourist spending by foreigners in the United States. While France is the world's leading destination for foreign tourists, attracting nearly 83 million people in 2016, it attracts tourism spending of a modest $42 billion. This pales against the U.S., whose 75.6 million inbound tourists spent $290 billion, making the U.S. by far the world's biggest earner from international tourism. Out of those nearly 76 million foreign visitors to the U.S. in 2016, fully half came from Canada and Mexico. China accounted for just 3 million. But then look at the spending. Those Chinese tourists spent $33 billion, almost as much as Canadians and Mexicans combined. Already, the U.S. tourism industry has suffered what some are calling the Trump slump. From his early efforts to block travel to the U.S. from a number of Middle Eastern economies that he deemed were sources of terrorism, to his attacks on Hispanics, remember his tweet against Mexicans on the campaign trail, "They re-bringing drugs. They re-bringing crime. They re-rapists." His decision to engage in trade wars with Canada and Mexico, his biggest trade partners, and his recent slur on shithole countries, it is hardly surprising that the flow of international tourists into the U.S. is faltering, and may decline further. Data just released by the UN World Tourism Organization show international travelers growing by more than 7% in 2017, with Europe seeing the strongest arrivals growth, up 8%. Arrivals in South America rose by 7%, while arrivals in Asian destinations jumped 6%. How about the U.S.? They reported a decline estimated at 2%, with a 10% drop from Europe and 7% from Mexico. As a result, Spain has now jumped ahead of the U.S. as the world's second most popular tourist destination. With an estimated 8.6 million jobs in the U.S. directly reliant on tourism, according to the U.S. Travel Association, and a further 15.3% benefiting indirectly, such contraction is no small matter. And as Trump ponders his assault on China, he should think on a few facts. According to the China Outbound Tourism Research Institute, based in Hamburg and Beijing, China was last year the source of 154 million international travelers. Admittedly, 68 million of these went either to Hong Kong or Taiwan, but that left 86 million traveling elsewhere overseas, which outranks Germany, 83 million, the US, 68 million, and the UK, 60 million. China's outbound tourism growth is currently running at over 6% a year, with predictions there will be more than 200 million Chinese traveling overseas by 2022. This is unlikely to slow anytime soon. Chinese took more than 4.4 billion domestic holidays in 2016, compared with Americans, who took 2.2 billion local holidays, and a rising number of these local Chinese travelers are on the cusp of becoming wealthy enough to think about international travel. Less than 10% of Chinese currently hold passports. Since China's international travelers are already by a large margin the world's biggest spending travelers, a failure to capture a share of this growth will have sobering impacts on those people in the U.S. who rely on tourism. In 2016, the latest year with reliable numbers, Chinese travelers spent $261 billion on their holidays overseas, compared with $124 billion by Americans, $80 billion by Germans,